The Apache girl's wrists were tied to a splintered post, her breath shallow as snarling coyotes circled closer. Just as her strength failed, a lone cowboy fired a shot that split the night air. He cut her free, lifted her trembling body into his saddle, and whispered words that silenced even the howls around them. "You're sleeping with me now." But what lay behind that vow, mercy, desire, or danger, was something no one could yet tell. The desert dusk burned orange against the horizon, casting long shadows over the dry brush and jagged rocks. The air was sharp with the scent of dust and blood. On a narrow ridge above the valley, Samuel Hart reined in his tired horse, ears pricked to the distant cries below. He had been tracking rumors of raiders for days, but nothing prepared him for the sight waiting in the gulch. Bound to a weathered post, a young Apache girl knelt in the dirt, her dress torn, her dark hair whipping in the wind. Around her, a half-circle of coyotes prowled, drawn by the weakness in her movements, their eyes glowing with hunger as they closed in. She lifted her chin defiantly, refusing to scream, even as her body trembled. Samuel's hand tightened on the rifle. He had seen cruelty before, men leaving women as bait for the scavengers of the plains, but this was worse. Deliberate humiliation, a death meant to be slow and public. His jaw clenched. He fired once, the shot echoing across the canyon. The lead coyote fell, the rest scattering back into the scrub with startled yelps. The girl gasped but did not cry out. Samuel spurred his horse down the rocky slope, dust exploding under its hooves. He dismounted in a single motion, knife flashing as he cut through the rope that bit into her wrists. She sagged forward, too weak to stand, her breath hitching against his chest. "You're safe now," he muttered, though his voice was rough, almost uncertain. She tilted her head toward him, eyes wide, a glimmer of both disbelief and suspicion in their depths. Behind them, the coyotes regrouped, circling again, their howls rising like a warning. Samuel lifted the girl onto his saddle, swung up behind her, and turned his horse toward the open desert. As they rode, he leaned close, words low against her ear. "You're sleeping with me now." The sentence hung between them, neither tender nor cruel, but heavy with meaning. Was it a promise of protection, or the beginning of a bond she could not yet refuse? The girl's silence carried its own weight, and Samuel knew this night had bound them in ways neither of them had chosen. Samuel tightened his grip on the reins as the horse pounded across the barren flats, dust rising in thick clouds that stung his eyes. The girl sat rigid in front of him, her hands still raw and trembling from the ropes, but she did not lean into him for balance. Instead, she kept her spine straight, as if refusing even now to surrender a piece of herself. "Hold on," he muttered, shifting the reins to one hand and steadying her with the other. She gave no reply. He could feel the heat of her skin beneath the torn buckskin dress, but there was no weight of trust in her posture, only resistance, quiet and unyielding. The sun had already dipped low, the desert cooling fast. Samuel knew they couldn't ride much longer. The girl's strength was nearly gone, and his horse limped faintly from the hard descent. He spotted a cluster of mesquite trees near a dry creek bed and turned the animal toward the cover. They dismounted in silence. Samuel eased her down gently, but her knees buckled and she dropped to the dirt. She caught herself with one hand, the other clutching her side where the rope had cut deep. Samuel crouched beside her, pulling a small canteen from his belt. "Drink," he said, holding it out. She hesitated, eyes fixed on him with guarded suspicion. Then, slowly, she took it, her lips brushing the rim. She drank only a little before thrusting it back. "You need more than that," he insisted. Her voice came low, rough with thirst yet steady. "I take only what I must." The words surprised him. Most in her place would have drained the canteen dry, but she spoke with the discipline of someone who had been taught to endure, to ration every breath, every drop. Samuel studied her face, sunburnt, streaked with dirt, but strong. "What's your name?" he asked. She didn't answer at first. The wind hissed through the mesquite branches overhead, and in the distance, the coyotes howled again. Finally, she said, "Aoka." He nodded. "I'm Samuel Hart. Folks call me Sam." Aoka's gaze drifted toward the horizon, where shadows stretched long and the last light bled out of the sky. She seemed to weigh his name, to decide whether it meant anything worth remembering. Samuel busied himself with gathering tinder. His hands moved automatically, the motions worn into him by years of lonely nights on the trail. He struck a spark, coaxing a flame until it grew into a modest fire. The warmth pushed back the desert chill, flickering across Aoka's face as she sat with her arms folded tight around her knees. He tore a strip from his saddlebag cloth and reached for her wrists. She flinched, pulling back. "I just want to clean the cuts," he said. His voice softened, almost apologetic. "You'll scar bad if you don't." Aoka stared at him for a moment, then slowly extended her hands. The rope burns were angry and raw, skin broken in places. Samuel dabbed them gently with water, careful not to press too hard. She winced once, but made no sound. "You've got grit," he murmured. "Most would be screaming." Her lips pressed into a line. "Screaming feeds the wolves." The simplicity of the answer chilled him more than the night air. He wrapped the cloth around her wrist, tying it snug. His fingers brushed her skin only once, but it was enough to notice how cold she had become. They sat by the fire, the silence thick between them. Samuel wanted to ask who had tied her to that post, who had left her as prey, but he bit the questions back. The desert was still awake, and questions could wait. The horse shifted nervously, ears flicking. Samuel's eyes snapped up. Beyond the firelight, the darkness moved, low shapes weaving in and out of the brush. Coyotes again, their patience unbroken. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dark, reflecting the fire. Samuel reached for his rifle, sliding it across his knees. "Stay close to the fire," he told her. Aoka did not move, only watched the shadows with that same unflinching stillness she'd held at the post. The coyotes crept nearer, drawn by the smell of smoke and blood. Samuel cocked the rifle, the click echoing like thunder in the stillness. He leveled it toward the brush, ready to fire, but before he could squeeze the trigger, a new sound split the air, low, heavy, deliberate. Not the thin yelps of coyotes. This was deeper. A growl that rolled like thunder out of the darkness. Samuel froze, the hair on his neck rising. The coyotes scattered, melting back into the scrub, but the growl remained, closer now, steady. Aoka's eyes flashed in the firelight. She turned toward the sound, her voice calm but certain. "That is no coyote." Samuel tightened his grip on the rifle, scanning the darkness. His gut twisted as he realized she was right. Something larger was out there, circling just beyond the reach of the flames. And then, from the shadows, a pair of golden eyes locked on them, silent, unblinking, and far too high off the ground to belong to any coyote. The fire cracked, spitting sparks into the night air. Samuel kept his rifle steady, eyes fixed on the glowing orbs just beyond the flames. The creature didn't move at first, only watched, its chest rising and falling with slow, deliberate breaths. Then, with a heavy step, it emerged from the shadows. A massive mountain lion padded into view, muscles rippling beneath its tawny coat. It moved silently despite its size, tail swaying low, head angled toward the two humans by the fire. Samuel had hunted before, but never had he seen one so bold, so willing to approach firelight. Aoka didn't flinch. She tilted her head slightly, as if listening to something Samuel couldn't hear. "He is hungry," she said softly. "But he is not yet certain." Samuel shot her a quick glance. "Hungry or not, he comes closer. I'll put him down." She shook her head once. "If you kill him, more will come. The smell of blood calls farther than fire." Her calm unnerved him. She sat cross-legged, hands resting lightly on her knees, as though the predator across the flames were no more than a passing wind. Samuel tightened his grip on the rifle anyway. The lion circled, keeping just outside the reach of the firelight. Its golden eyes never left them. Each time Samuel thought it might retreat, it edged a little closer, its paws silent on the sand. The horse stamped nervously, snorting, pulling against the reins tied to a low branch. "Stay still," Samuel whispered, though his own voice trembled with tension. Aoka rose slowly, every movement deliberate, her gaze fixed on the lion. Samuel's gut twisted. "What the hell are you doing?" She didn't answer. She took a single step forward, placing herself between the fire and the beast. Her shoulders were square, her posture steady, her breath even. Samuel nearly cursed aloud, raising the rifle, but her voice stopped him. "Do not fire yet." The mountain lion paused, tail twitching. Its ears flicked forward, curious. Aoka knelt, scooping a handful of sand, and let it slip slowly through her fingers. Her lips moved, whispering words Samuel didn't understand. It wasn't prayer, not exactly. It was rhythm, like speaking to the earth itself. The lion's muscles bunched. Samuel held his breath, finger tight on the trigger. Then, with a sudden growl, the cat leapt sideways, vanishing into the scrub as quickly as it had come. Silence swallowed the clearing, broken only by the horse's ragged snorts and Samuel's pounding heartbeat. He lowered the rifle, staring at her. "What in God's name was that?" Aoka turned back toward him, her face calm but her hands trembling faintly at her sides. "He chose another path tonight," she said. Samuel couldn't decide if it was luck, madness, or something deeper. He wanted to press her, to demand an explanation, but the exhaustion in her posture stopped him. She sank back down by the fire, pulling the blanket he'd left across her shoulders, and said nothing more. For a long while, neither spoke. The fire burned low, crackling softly, casting faint shadows on the dry creek bed. Samuel watched her, the way her eyes reflected the flames, the way she sat unbowed despite everything she'd endured. He'd seen men twice her size crumble after less. Finally, he broke the silence. "You didn't scream when the coyotes came. You didn't scream when that cat near took us both. Why?" Aoka's gaze flicked to him, sharp and steady. "Screaming feeds what hunts you. Silence keeps you alive." Her words lodged in his chest, heavier than he expected. He'd lived by instinct, by gun and grit. But he'd never thought of silence as a weapon. He leaned back, stretching his legs toward the dying fire. "You're a strange one, Aoka, stronger than most men I've known." She didn't smile. She only looked at the horizon, where the stars pressed thick against the desert sky. "Strength is not choice. It is what is left when choice is taken." Samuel felt the truth in her tone. He thought of the rope burns on her wrists, of the defiance in her posture, even when tied to that post. She hadn't survived because she was lucky. She'd survived because she refused to yield. The fire dwindled to embers. Samuel tossed on another branch, coaxing fresh flames. He pulled his coat tighter, leaning against the saddle. "Get some rest." "We ride at dawn." Aoka lay down near the fire, pulling the blanket close. She didn't face him, but her breathing grew steady, slow. Samuel sat awake a while longer, rifle across his lap, eyes scanning the darkness for movement. When at last sleep crept in, it was restless, haunted by golden eyes and whispered words he couldn't understand. He woke at first light to the sound of movement, soft, deliberate. Aoka was already up, crouched at the creek bed, her hands tracing the sand, eyes sharp and alert. Samuel rubbed the sleep from his eyes and reached for his rifle. "What are you doing?" he asked. She didn't turn. They were here. Who? Her hand brushed the imprint of a boot, half buried in the sand. She looked back at him, her voice low but steady. "Men, not animals. They came in the night." Samuel's stomach dropped. He scanned the horizon, but the desert stretched empty and endless. Whoever they were close, and worse, if they had seen the fire, they knew exactly where to find them. The morning light spread pale and cold across the desert, painting the land in shades of ash and gold. Samuel crouched beside Aoka, studying the tracks she'd uncovered in the creek bed. The prints were deep, the edges still sharp. Whoever had left them had passed only hours before, maybe even while they slept. He ran a calloused thumb over the mark. 3 men, maybe 4. Heavy boots, not drifters. They walk with purpose. Aoka nodded. Raiders. Her tone was certain, not a guess. Samuel glanced up at her, catching the quiet steel in her gaze. She knew these men, or at least their kind. The same men, he realized, who might have tied her to that post, left her as prey. He rose, dusting his hands on his trousers. "If they're trailing us, we can't linger. Pack your things." Aoka gave him a look. sharp, cutting, but bent to gather the blanket anyway. She moved quickly, efficient despite the rawness of her wrists and the stiffness in her limbs. Samuel saddled the horse, his jaw tight. He hated the idea of leaving signs of their camp so fresh. The men would know they weren't far. By the time the sun cleared the horizon, they were already riding hard, the horse's hooves drumming a steady rhythm against the sand. Samuel kept his eyes sweeping the ridges, every shadow a possible ambush. Aoka sat behind him, silent, one hand gripping the back of his coat for balance. Hours passed with only the whistle of the wind in their ears. But then, just past midday, Samuel spotted movement on a far ridge, a flash of sunlight on metal. He pulled the reins sharply, guiding the horse into a shallow ravine. "They've found us," he muttered. Aoka leaned forward, her breath warm against his ear. "You should have let me walk. You're slower with me here." Samuel barked a dry laugh. "And leave you to them, not a chance." She was silent for a moment. Then, quietly, "You don't know what chance you take keeping me." Before he could answer, the crack of a rifle split the air. A plume of dust leapt from the earth beside them. Samuel kicked the horse forward, heart hammering. Another shot rang out, closer this time. The ravine twisted sharply, offering cover. Samuel pulled the horse to a stop, sliding from the saddle and dragging Aoka with him. They pressed against the rocky wall, breaths ragged. "Stay low," he ordered, checking the chamber of his rifle. Aoka crouched beside him, her eyes scanning the ridge with uncanny precision. She raised her hand, pointing toward a cluster of boulders. "There, 2 men." Samuel followed her gesture, squinting. Sure enough, a pair of shapes shifted behind the rocks. His chest tightened. She'd seen them faster than he had. "Good eyes," he muttered. Her voice was calm but laced with bitterness. "My people learned early. If you don't see first, you don't live." The words stung more than he expected. He took aim, waiting for a clear shot. But before he could fire, a voice echoed down from the ridge. "Cowboy!" Rough, mocking. "Leave the girl and ride on. She ain't yours to keep." Samuel's grip on the rifle tightened. He shouted back, "She's not yours either." Laughter drifted down, cruel and sharp. "She's ours by right. You think you can buy an Apache's fate with bullets?" Aoka's jaw clenched, her hands curling into fists. Samuel glanced at her, but she refused to meet his eyes. The words clearly weren't meant for him. They were meant for her, a reminder of the chains she'd been dragged in. Another shot cracked, ricocheting off the stone above their heads. Dust rained down. Samuel pulled her closer against the wall. His mind raced. 3, maybe 4 men on the ridge. Outnumbered, pinned down. The horse snorted nervously, tugging at the reins. If they bolted now, they'd be cut down before they cleared the ravine. But if they stayed, they'd be boxed in until the men decided to come down and finish it. Aoka's voice broke through his thoughts, quiet but urgent. "There is another way." He looked at her sharply. "What way?" She pointed down the ravine, where a narrow slit in the rock cut toward deeper shadow. "A path. My people used it to escape when soldiers came. They won't know it." Samuel hesitated. It looked barely wide enough for a man to slip through, let alone a horse. But Aoka's certainty shook him. "Are you sure?" he pressed. Her eyes met his for the first time since the shots began. "Do you trust me?" The question hung heavy in the hot air, louder than the gunfire. Samuel's throat tightened. Trust wasn't something he'd given easily, not to men, not to women, not to strangers. Yet here he was, cornered, with nothing but her word to stand on. Another shot rang out, closer still. The men were moving down. Samuel cursed under his breath, made his choice, and grabbed the reins. "Stay close," he told her, guiding the horse toward the dark slit in the rock. As they slipped into the narrow passage, the echoes of the men's laughter followed, bouncing off the canyon walls. But the sound that froze Samuel's blood came not from the ridge. It came from ahead, deeper in the shadows where Aoka's path led. A sound low and metallic, the rattle of spurs on stone. The narrow slit in the canyon pressed them close, the walls jagged and damp with the cool shadow that never saw the sun. Samuel led the horse carefully, one hand on the reins, the other gripping his rifle. Behind him, Aoka moved with surprising confidence, her steps sure on the uneven stone. But then came the sound again, metal striking rock, slow and deliberate. Spurs. Samuel froze. His eyes darted ahead, narrowing against the dim light. A silhouette shifted at the end of the passage, blocking the way. The man stepped forward, tall and broad, his hat pulled low, a rifle slung casual across his chest. The glint of iron at his boots confirmed what Samuel had heard. The stranger leaned one shoulder against the rock wall as if he'd been waiting. "Well, well," the man drawled, voice echoing in the narrow pass. "Thought I heard a rat in the cracks. Didn't reckon it'd be you, Hart." Samuel stiffened. "Carver!" A slow grin spread across the man's face. His teeth were yellow, his eyes hard as flint. "Didn't think you were fool enough to ride back through Apache land. And with company, no less." His gaze slid to Aoka, lingering like a knife point. "Pretty company." Samuel's grip on the rifle tightened. "Step aside." Carver chuckled low, shaking his head. "You know I can't do that. Boys up top are eager. They'll be coming down soon enough. But me, I like to take first pick." Aoka's jaw clenched, but she said nothing. Her silence was sharp as any blade, but Samuel could feel the tension radiating off her. Samuel raised the rifle. "One more word, and you're done." Carver didn't flinch. He leaned forward, spitting into the dust between them. "You don't scare me, Hart. You never did. You've been riding alone too long, making yourself believe you're some kind of savior. Truth is, you're just as broken as the rest of us." The words cut deeper than Samuel expected. Old history stirred, the nights he and Carver had once ridden together, hunting bounties across the border, before Carver's taste for cruelty had driven Samuel to walk away. Now here he was again, standing between Samuel and the girl, a shadow of the past refusing to let him go. The horse shifted nervously, hooves scraping against the stone. Samuel took a step forward, rifle still leveled. "You'll move her, Carver, or you'll bleed here." Carver smirked, lifting his own weapon, slow as a snake uncoiling. "Then let's see who bleeds first." The standoff stretched, heavy as the desert heat. Samuel's finger curled on the trigger. Then Aoka's voice broke the silence, calm, low, unshaken. "He won't shoot you." Both men glanced at her. Her eyes burned steady in the dim light. "He wants you alive." "He wants you afraid," Carver sneered. "And what would you know of it, girl?" She stepped closer, the firelight gone from her skin but something fiercer in her stance. "I know men who kill fast, and men who savor the pain. You're the second, which means you wait too long." Samuel didn't waste the opening. In one motion, he shifted his rifle and fired. The shot rang out, deafening in the narrow pass. Carver's hat spun off his head as the bullet grazed the rock inches from his face, showering him with shards of stone. Carver stumbled back, cursing, his grin twisted into a snarl. Samuel shoved Aoka behind him, pulling her toward the horse. "Move!" They bolted deeper into the passage, the walls pressing tighter. Behind them, Carver's voice echoed, furious and raw. "You can run, Hart, but you can't hide her forever." The words chased them through the canyon, bouncing from stone to stone. Samuel's gut knotted. Carver wasn't bluffing. The men on the ridge were closing in, and now Carver had blood in his eyes. The passage spat them out into a wider gulch, the light stabbing their eyes after the dim shadows. Samuel yanked the horse forward, scanning the ridges. For the moment, it looked empty. They stopped only long enough for Samuel to reload, his hands shaking with the adrenaline. Aoka stood close, her breath quick but her expression steady. "You knew him," she said. Samuel nodded grimly. "Once. Long ago." Her gaze didn't waver. "And now? Now he's worse than any beast we faced last night." Aoka studied him for a long moment, then said quietly, "Beasts hunt for hunger. Men like him hunt for shame." Samuel didn't answer. Her words were too true. He turned and scanning the horizon again. They needed distance, but Carver would follow. And with the others closing in, it was only a matter of time before they were trapped again. The horse stamped the ground, restless. Samuel swung into the saddle, pulling Aoka up behind him. He spurred the animal forward, dust flying in their wake. But even as they rode, Samuel couldn't shake the echo of Carver's words, nor the knowledge that the man wouldn't stop until he had what he wanted. And then, as the sun dipped low once more, Samuel saw it, smoke curling in the distance, rising from where his ranch should have stood. The closer they rode, the thicker the smoke grew, heavy with the acrid stench of burned wood and scorched earth. Samuel's gut twisted with every stride of the horse. He had left his ranch that morning intact, a fragile refuge carved out of loneliness and hard work. Now, the black column rising into the sky told a different story. Aoka clung to him, silent but alert. Her head tilted slightly, listening, her breath even despite the urgency. Samuel envied her composure. His own chest felt like it might split apart. When they crested the last ridge, the sight below froze him. The cabin's roof had collapsed inward, charred beams jutting upward like broken ribs. The corral fence lay scattered, and the mule that had once plodded lazily inside was nowhere to be seen. The yard was littered with footprints, heavy boots pressed deep in the ash, circling like wolves around prey. Samuel reined in hard, staring. His throat was dry, rage simmering just beneath his ribs. "They torched it," he muttered, voice low. Aoka slid down from the saddle, crouching near the tracks. She brushed her fingers lightly across the soot, following the patterns with uncanny precision. 4 men, maybe 5. They left quickly, but they searched first. Samuel swung down, jaw clenched. Searching for what? Her eyes met his, sharp and unflinching. "For me." The words landed heavy. He knew she was right. Carver hadn't been chasing Samuel out of old grudges, he'd been chasing her. Whatever history she carried, it was enough to bring men willing to burn and kill. Samuel kicked at a charred beam, sending sparks scattering. "This place was all I had left." His voice cracked before he caught himself, hardening again. "Damn them." Aoka stood, the firelight from the ruins painting her face in shades of bronze and ash. A home can be rebuilt, but you cannot if you let rage blind you. Her calmness infuriated him for a moment, but then he saw her wrists again, still raw, wrapped in his torn cloth, and the weight of her words settled. She had lost more than he ever had, yet she stood steady. He turned sharply, scanning the horizon. "We can't stay. They'll come back to see if I returned." The horse stamped nervously, ears flicking. Aoka bent, pressing her palm against the earth. "They're near," she whispered. The ground still shakes from their steps. Samuel felt the back of his neck prickle. He dropped into a crouch beside her, listening. At first, he heard nothing. Then, faint but growing clearer, the distant clatter of hooves carried on the dry wind. "They're circling back," he said, teeth gritted. Aoka's eyes darted to the canyon behind them, where the smoke drifted thick. "If we ride now, they'll see us against the sky." Samuel cursed under his breath. The open desert offered no cover. Running meant death. They needed another plan. He led the horse toward the collapsed barn, tugging Aoka behind him. The walls still stood in part, blackened but strong enough to hide them from a distance. He pulled her into the shadows, crouching low as the hoofbeats grew louder. Minutes dragged. Then came the voices, rough, mocking, carried clear in the still air. "Burned it good, didn't we?" One man jeered. "Bet Hart comes back sniffing like a dog to his pen." Another voice, deeper, colder, Carver. "He'll come, he always does, and when he does, the girl'll be with him." Aoka's shoulders stiffened, but she stayed silent. Samuel's hand hovered over his rifle, his knuckles white. Every instinct screamed to rush out, to gun them down where they stood, but he forced himself to stay still. Outnumbered, exposed, they'd be dead in seconds. From their hiding place, they watched 3 riders appear, silhouettes against the burning remains. Carver led them, his hat low, his rifle across the saddle horn. He dismounted slowly, surveying the wreckage with satisfaction. "Search the rubble," he ordered. "He's stubborn. He might have left something worth taking." The other 2 dismounted, kicking through the ashes. One laughed when he found a cracked tin cup, tossing it aside. The other pulled up the charred remains of a chair, snapping it in half. Samuel's chest burned. Every broken piece felt like a wound in his own flesh. He bit the inside of his cheek until he tasted blood, forcing himself not to move. Beside him, Aoka leaned close, her whisper barely audible. "Patience. Fire burns fast, but smoke hides longer. Wait." Her words calmed him, just enough to hold still as Carver paced the yard. The man paused, squinting toward the barn. For a heartbeat, Samuel thought he'd been spotted. Carver's gaze lingered, his hand brushing the butt of his revolver. Then he turned away, spitting into the dirt. Nothing here. He'll come to us. He's got nowhere else to run. They mounted up again, the sound of hooves fading into the distance. Samuel exhaled slowly, muscles trembling with the restraint. He turned to Aoka, whispering harshly, "They'll hunt us until one of us is dead. You know that, don't you?" Her eyes held his without flinching. "Then you must decide, are you running for yourself or for me?" The question struck deeper than any bullet. For a long moment, Samuel had no answer. And then, outside in the yard, a sudden crack split the air. Not a gunshot, but the snap of a branch under weight. Samuel raised his rifle instantly, eyes darting toward the tree line. Someone else was here. The crack of the branch echoed too sharp to be wind. Samuel held his rifle steady, breath locked in his chest. Aoka froze, her dark eyes fixed on the tree line beyond the smoldering ruins. The horse tossed its head, nostrils flaring, sensing the tension. For a moment, silence pressed heavy. Then, slowly, a figure emerged from the shadows, hands raised, palms open. "Easy, Hart," the man called. His voice carried the rasp of long miles and dry whiskey. "Ain't here to shoot you." Samuel's jaw tightened. He knew that voice. It belonged to Eli Turner, an old drifter he'd once ridden with back in Texas, a man whose loyalty shifted with the wind. "Drop the rifle, Eli," Samuel barked, "or I'll make sure you don't finish that sentence." Eli gave a dry chuckle, lowering his rifle and setting it carefully on the ground. He stepped forward, face weathered, beard ragged. Word was, "Carver's boy's been sniffing after you." Figured I'd see if the stories were true. His eyes flicked to Aoka, lingering with a curiosity Samuel didn't like. "And I reckon they are." Samuel's stance didn't ease. "If you're riding with Carver, walk away now." Eli shook his head, spitting into the dirt. "Ain't riding with nobody, not anymore. Carver's gone meaner than a rattler. I got no taste for that." He squatted near the ashes, poking at a charred beam with his boot. Guessing he was looking for her. Aoka didn't move, her expression unreadable, but Samuel felt her tense at his side, as though the weight of Eli's words were another set of ropes binding her. "What do you know?" Samuel demanded. Eli's eyes narrowed, studying the girl. "No, she ain't just some stray. Carver don't burn down houses for scraps. He burns 'em for bounties. And I heard tell of a price on an Apache girl, blind some say, but sharper than any hunter." Samuel's stomach dropped. He turned to Aoka, but she wouldn't meet his gaze. Eli grinned faintly. "Didn't figure you for the type to play hero, Hart, not after what happened in Abilene." Samuel's blood ran hot. "That was years ago. You keep your mouth shut." But Aoka spoke then, her voice calm but edged with iron. "What happened in Abilene?" The question cut clean. Samuel opened his mouth, but no words came. The fire popped behind them, filling the silence he couldn't. Eli chuckled again, shaking his head. "Man's past always catches up. Yours just caught up with a torch." He rose slowly, brushing ash from his hands. "But I ain't here to trade ghosts. I came to warn you. Carver's boys are riding south, blocking the pass to Silver Rock. You try to head that way, you'll die." Samuel frowned. "And why the hell should I believe you?" Eli met his eyes, the grin gone now. "Because Carver's worse than you remember, and he don't just want her. He wants to break you. You kill me here, fine, but then you'll have no one who knows the trails he's laying." Samuel hesitated. The man was a snake, slippery and dangerous, but sometimes snakes were the only ones who knew the ground ahead. Aoka stepped forward, her voice steady. "Men who change sides are not to be trusted." Eli tilted his head, smirking at her. "Sharp tongue for one who don't speak much. You're right not to trust me, girl. But you'll want to hear what I know." Samuel weighed the rifle in his hands, every instinct torn. The thought of riding blind into Carver's trap made his skin crawl, but trusting Eli Turner was a gamble that could cost them both their lives. Finally, Samuel lowered the rifle slightly, though his eyes stayed hard. "Talk. But one wrong move, Eli, and I'll finish what I should have in Abilene." Eli nodded, spreading his hands. Fair enough. Carver's planning to cut you off at the canyon fork. He'll drive you east to where the land's dry and the water holes are gone. Starve you out, break your will. He's patient like that. Samuel's stomach clenched. It sounded just like Carver. Slow cruelty instead of quick death. And what do you get out of this? Samuel pressed. Eli's grin returned, thin and tired. Same thing I always get. Survival. Carver don't forgive debts, and I owe him plenty. If I help you burn him down, maybe I can walk free. The words hung between them, thick with risk. Aoka studied Eli's face, her eyes narrowing. Then she spoke softly to Samuel. A man who fears another man more than death will betray you when fear returns. Her warning cut deep, but Samuel's options were thin. He holstered the rifle, though his hand stayed close. We move west, he decided. Carver won't expect it. You're riding with us, Eli. But one false step and I'll put you in the ground myself. Eli gave a low whistle, retrieving his rifle from the dirt. Fair deal at heart. Fair deal. As they mounted up, Aoka's hand tightened briefly on Samuel's arm. She didn't speak, but her eyes told him enough. She did not trust Eli, and she didn't want Samuel to either. They rode out into the fading light, 3 shadows against the ash-stained horizon. For the moment they shared a path, but as the first stars pricked the sky, Samuel caught Eli watching Aoka too long, his expression unreadable. And Samuel knew this uneasy alliance would not hold forever. The desert stretched endless beneath the fading light, each mile swallowing the hooves of their horses in silence. Samuel rode ahead, shoulders tight, scanning the ridges as if Carver's shadow lurked behind every stone. Aoka sat close, her eyes steady on the horizon. Eli trailed just behind, his grin gone, his face a mask of weariness or calculation. Samuel couldn't tell which. The air grew colder as night approached. The wind carried whispers through the sage, a sound that made Samuel's skin prickle. He slowed the horse near a cluster of rocks, motioning for the others to stop. We'll rest here till moonrise, he said. His voice was flat, commanding. Eli dismounted with a groan, stretching his back. Can't argue with that. Horse'll drop dead if we push harder. Samuel ignored him, focusing on Aoka. Stay close to the fire when I light it. No wondering. She bristled faintly. I am not a child. His jaw tightened, but he only nodded. All the same, tonight the dark ain't safe. As Samuel gathered wood, Eli crouched beside Aoka. His tone was casual, almost friendly. You know he can't keep you safe forever, girl. Heart's tough, sure, but Carver's got men stacked higher than his pride. Aoka's gaze cut to him, sharp as flint. Better a man who stands alone than one who bows to many. Eli chuckled low, shaking his head. Sharp tongue again. Careful, or you'll make me think you're the one running this little escape. Samuel returned before she could answer, dropping the wood between them. His eyes locked on Eli. You keep your words short around her. The fire sparked to life, its glow pushing back the creeping dark. They ate in silence, jerky and dry bread, each lost in thought. Samuel's ears strained at every sound, the crack of branches, the whisper of wind, the cry of a distant coyote. But beneath it all, another unease gnawed at him, Eli's presence. When the meal ended, Aoka lay near the flames, blanket pulled around her shoulders. Samuel sat watch, rifle across his lap. Eli leaned against a rock, hat low over his eyes, though Samuel doubted he slept. Hours passed. The moon climbed high, silver light cutting sharp shadows across the land. Samuel's eyelids grew heavy, but he forced them open, fighting the weight of exhaustion. Then, a rustle. Too heavy for wind, too near for coyotes. Samuel snapped alert, rifle raised. Eli stirred, hand already on his pistol. From the ridge above, a stone clattered down. Samuel's eyes darted upward. A figure moved against the moonlit sky. Then another, and another. Damn, Eli muttered. They found us, Samuel's heart hammered. He counted at least 3 silhouettes cresting the ridge. More followed, their outlines stark against the stars, Carver's men. He turned sharply to Aoka. Wake, now! She was already sitting up, blanket tossed aside. her expression calm even as the shadows closed in. "They're circling," Eli said, crouching low. "We're boxed if we stay." Samuel's mind raced. Open fire meant suicide. Too many, too high on the ridge. Running meant exposing themselves, but waiting was death. Then Aoka spoke, her voice cutting through the chaos. "There is a wash nearby. The ground dips, hidden by brush. If we reach it, we vanish." Samuel didn't hesitate. "Show me." They doused the fire with sand, plunging into darkness. The night swallowed them, the only sound their hurried steps and the soft jingle of tack. Samuel led the horse, Aoka close beside him, Eli covering the rear with his pistol ready. Behind them, voices carried on the wind, rough, laughing, confident. Carver's men knew they had them cornered. The wash appeared suddenly, a shallow cut in the earth tangled with thornbrush. Samuel pushed the horse through, shielding Aoka as branches tore at their clothes. They crouched low, hidden by the earth's curve. For a moment, silence, then footsteps above. Men fanned out along the ridge, torches glowing, their light casting jagged shadows across the rocks. One voice barked orders, clear and cruel. "Carver, find them! Heart's close. I can smell his damn pride." Samuel's grip on the rifle tightened. He could almost see Carver's sneer, hear the boots crunching above their heads. Every breath felt like thunder in his chest. Aoka reached out, laying her hand lightly on his arm. Her touch was steady, grounding. Her whisper brushed his ear. "Patience. Let them pass." Eli shifted behind them, his breath ragged. "We wait too long. They'll sniff us out," he hissed. Samuel turned, eyes burning. "One sound from you, and I'll end this myself." The tension stretched, every second a noose. Above, the torches moved slowly, searching. Then, miraculously, they turned away, the voices fading into the distance. Samuel exhaled, shoulders sagging. They had slipped the noose, for now. But as the silence returned, Aoka leaned close, her whisper colder than the desert wind. "They will not stop, Samuel. They will burn everything, everyone, until I am in their hands." Samuel met her gaze, the weight of her words heavy. "Then we don't run forever," he said. "We turn and we fight." The determination in his tone cut through the night like a blade. But from the look in Aoka's eyes, Samuel knew, before they fought Carver, he'd first have to face the secrets she still carried. Dawn crept slow across the desert, bleeding light into the wash where they had hidden. The ground was cold and damp, their blankets thin, the silence broken only by the distant cry of hawks circling overhead. Samuel rose first, stiff from a night of half-sleep, his rifle never far from reach. He scanned the horizon, every shadow a threat. Eli stirred next, grumbling, stretching his back with exaggerated groans. "Hell of a bed you found us, Hart. Rocks in places a man shouldn't have rocks." Samuel ignored him, focusing instead on Aoka. She sat cross-legged near the brush, eyes closed, her face tilted toward the morning sun. Her stillness unnerved him. She looked almost at peace, though Samuel could sense the storm beneath. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "How you should leave me." Samuel turned sharply. "Not a chance." Her eyes opened, dark and unwavering. "Carver hunts me, not you. With me gone, you live." Samuel shook his head. "Doesn't work that way. Men like Carver don't stop once they've started. He'll hunt me whether you're here or not." Eli chuckled low, spitting into the dirt. "Girl's got a point, Hart. Hand her over. You walk free. Carver gets what he wants, and maybe he lets you keep breathing." Samuel rounded on him, rifle raised. "You say that again, Turner, and I'll make sure you stop breathing." Eli raised both hands, smirk thin. "Easy, just speaking what's true." But Aoka's gaze stayed on Samuel. "He is right about one thing. There is a bounty. My father gave me up, sold me to men like Carver when debt chained him tighter than rope." She looked away, her voice tightening. "But I am worth more than coin, not because of who I am, but because of what I carry." Samuel's chest tightened. "What do you mean?" She reached into the fold of her dress, pulling free a small pouch of worn leather, tied with sinew. She held it between them, her fingers trembling slightly. "This," Samuel frowned. "What is it?" Her eyes dropped to the pouch. "It is the only thing my mother left me. Inside is proof, names, markings, trade records. Deals made between ranchers and soldiers, selling Apache land for gold. Carver works for those men. That is why he hunts me." Samuel's stomach dropped. The game was bigger than he had thought. Carver wasn't chasing vengeance or simple cruelty. He was working for men who feared exposure, men who would burn a dozen ranches to keep their secrets buried. Eli whistled low. "Well, ain't that something? No wonder they want you, girl. You're a walking gallows rope for half the territory." Aoka closed her fist around the pouch. "It is not for revenge, it is for truth. My people deserve to know why their homes burn, why their children starve. Without this, they are told lies. With it, they can fight." Samuel felt the weight of her words press heavy on him. He thought of his own ranch, now ashes on the wind, and realized he wasn't just a bystander anymore. "You should have told me," he said. Her voice cut sharp. "Would you have stayed, knowing Carver would never stop? Or would you have walked away like every other man?" The words pierced him. Samuel had walked away before, from battles, from friends, from a woman who once trusted him. The memory of Abilene burned fresh in his chest, though he pushed it down. "I'm here," he said finally, "and I'll see this through." Eli snorted, shaking his head. "You're both mad. You think you can drag a pouch of names across the desert and topple men who got lawmen in their pockets? Hell, Hart, you ain't just signing your death, you're signing mine, too." Samuel's eyes hardened. "Nobody asked you to stay." For once, Eli didn't grin. His eyes flicked to Aoka, then back to Samuel. "Carver won't quit, not till she's in his hands. And if that pouch is what you say it is, there's more than Carver after her. You'll be hunted by ranchers, soldiers, maybe even judges. You're sitting on a fire that'll burn the whole territory." Aoka's face didn't waver. "Then let it burn. Better flames than silence." The conviction in her voice silenced them both. Samuel stared at her, seeing not just the girl tied to a post the night before, but a woman carrying the weight of an entire people. He felt a shift deep inside. This wasn't about rescue anymore. It was about choosing sides in a war already raging. The wind shifted, carrying faint echoes of hoofbeats. Samuel stiffened, listening. Aoka tilted her head, her voice low. "They are closer than before." Samuel grabbed the rifle, motioning to the others. "We move now. If Carver wants this fight, we give it to him on ground we choose." They mounted quickly, the horse uneasy beneath the weight of three. The horizon stretched wide, unforgiving. Samuel spurred forward, the words echoing in his mind. Better flames than silence. And as the dust rose behind them, he knew Carver was not far. But he also knew the real fire was no longer in Carver's torch. It was in the leather pouch clenched tight in Aoka's hands. The desert sun burned high, washing the land in blinding white. Samuel urged the horse harder, every muscle taut with urgency. Aoka clutched the saddle horn, the leather pouch still hidden in her fist. Eli rode alongside, sweat dripping from his brow, eyes darting nervously across the horizon. They had ridden for hours, but the hoofbeats behind them never faded. Dust plumes rose in the distance. Carver's men, relentless, closing the gap. Samuel pulled the horse into a shallow arroyo, the walls high enough to give cover. He dismounted quickly, tying the reins tight. "We can't outrun them anymore," he said, voice rough. "We make our stand here." Eli shook his head violently. "You're out of your damn mind. There's at least 6 riders back there, maybe more. You think 3 of us, 1 half-dead horse, can hold 'em off?" Samuel's eyes narrowed. "I don't think. I know we got no other choice." Aoka slipped down from the saddle, her steps light, steady. She stood beside Samuel, her face calm, though her eyes burned with something fiercer than fear. "If they want me, then let them come. I will not be tied again." Samuel studied her, frail from days without rest, wrists still scarred, but unbroken. She had the heart of steel he'd only seen in men hardened by war. Eli spat into the dust. "Then it's suicide, and I didn't sign up for suicide." Samuel turned sharply, his voice low and lethal. "You signed up when you followed us. You stay, you fight, you run, and you'll die slower when Carver finds you." Eli swallowed, his bravado faltering. He muttered curses under his breath but began checking his revolver all the same. They worked quickly, dragging brush and loose stone to the mouth of the arroyo, forming a crude barricade. Samuel positioned himself with the rifle. Eli crouched behind a boulder with pistols ready. Aoka knelt at Samuel's side, eyes closed, listening to the approach. "They are close," she whispered. "6 riders, one heavier than the rest." Samuel's gut tightened. Carver. Minutes later, the thunder of hooves shook the ground. Shadows flickered on the ridge above, then descended. 6 men, dust rising like storm clouds around them. Carver led, his coat long and black, his grin wide beneath the brim of his hat. He reined in just beyond rifle range, scanning the arroyo with slow satisfaction. "Hart," he called, his voice carrying clear. "Knew you couldn't run forever." Samuel's rifle was steady, aimed at Carver's chest. "I should have left it at Ash's, Carver." Carver laughed, deep and cruel. "And miss the fun? No, you got something I want. Hand her over. Maybe I let you crawl out of this alive." Aoka rose, stepping into view beside Samuel. The sight of her made Carver's grin sharpen. "There she is, little bird with fire in her hands. Come now, girl. No need to bleed for a man who don't know what you're worth." Her voice rang out, steady as stone. "I know my worth. And it is more than the coin of traitors." Carver's grin faltered, his eyes narrowed. "She's got your tongue, Hart. Careful, or she'll hang you with it." He raised his hand, signaling his men. "Take them alive." The riders spurred forward, guns drawn. Samuel fired first, the crack echoing through the arroyo. One rider dropped, tumbling hard into the dust. Eli's pistols barked, wild but fast, driving another back. The rest closed in, bullets sparking off stone, the air thick with dust and smoke. "Down!" Samuel shouted, pulling Aoka behind the barricade. She ducked, clutching the pouch tight, her breath fast, but her gaze unbroken. Carver dismounted, striding forward through the chaos, revolver steady in his hand. His presence alone seemed to bend the fight, his men rallying behind his shadow. He fired twice, bullets biting into the stone inches from Samuel's head. Samuel reloaded, jaw tight. Eli cursed loudly, fumbling with his last rounds. "We can't hold 'em, Hart. They'll bleed us dry." But before Samuel could answer, Aoka rose from cover. She held the pouch high, her voice ringing out over the gunfire. "This is what you want." Everything stopped. Even Carver froze, his grin twisting into something darker. Aoka's eyes burned. "You burned homes. You broke families. And still you fear these papers more than any bullet." Carver's expression curdled, rage flashing. "You think that scrap will save you? You don't even know the fire you're playing with, girl." His men hesitated, eyes darting between Carver and the pouch. Doubt flickered in their faces, the kind that cracks loyalty. Samuel's heart pounded. She had just shifted the ground beneath them. Carver stepped forward, gun leveled at Aoka. "Give it to me, or I swear—" The rest of his threat was drowned by a sudden shot, loud, close, unexpected. One of Carver's own men staggered, blood spreading across his chest, his pistol still smoking. The man had fired, not at Samuel, not at Aoka, but at another of Carver's riders. And just like that, the line of loyalty shattered. The gunshot still echoed off the canyon walls when the first rider hit the ground, dust rising around his body. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then chaos erupted. Another of Carver's men spun, shouting, "You bastard!" and fired at the traitor who had just dropped to his knees, clutching his chest. The shot missed, ricocheting off stone, but it was enough to break the fragile thread of obedience holding them together. 2 riders turned their guns on each other, years of buried grudges spilling out in an instant. Bullets cracked in the arroyo, men cursing, horses screaming as they reared and scattered. The air filled with smoke and confusion. Samuel seized the moment. "Now!" he barked, shoving Aoka behind the barricade. He rose, rifle steady, and fired into the fray. One rider tumbled from the saddle, crashing into the dirt. Eli, wild-eyed, emptied both pistols, shouting curses that vanished in the roar of gunfire. Carver didn't flinch. He strode through the storm like a man carved from stone, his revolver spitting fire with every step. He dropped one of his own men without hesitation, the man who had hesitated too long to follow orders. His voice boomed over the chaos. "You think you can break me with paper and whispers? You think I don't own the law itself?" Aoka's voice rang out, clear even through the din. "Lies own you, Carver. Truth will burn you." Her defiance cut through him, if only for a flicker. His eyes blazed as he locked onto her, raising his revolver. Samuel fired first, the bullet grazing Carver's shoulder. Carver staggered, teeth bared in pain and rage. He turned his gun on Samuel, their eyes locking across the smoke. "Still playing hero, Hart," Carver growled. "You ain't got the stomach to finish what you start." Samuel's jaw clenched. "You'll find out soon enough." Another shot cracked, Eli firing wild. The bullet struck Carver's hat, spinning it from his head. Carver wheeled on Eli, fury twisting his face. "I should have gutted you in Abilene," he roared. Eli froze, the memory of whatever ghosts bound them flashing across his eyes. For a moment, Samuel thought Carver would kill him outright. But the fight around them surged, pulling Carver's attention back as one of his men shouted, "We're outnumbered." It was true. Half of Carver's riders now lay in the dust, cut down by bullets or their own infighting. The others pulled back, uncertain, casting nervous glances at Carver as though waiting for him to fall. Carver stood bleeding, coat torn, eyes burning with venom. He raised his revolver again, but this time his voice was calm, deadly calm. "This ain't over, Art. I'll drag you both to hell before I quit." He fired once more, the bullet tearing splinters from the barricade inches from Aoka's face. She didn't flinch. Instead, she held the pouch high again, her voice fierce. "Kill me, and the truth lives with him." She pointed at Samuel. "Kill him, and it lives with me." The men hesitated, their resolve splintering further. One rider cursed, throwing down his gun and spurring his horse away. Another followed. The rest shifted uneasily, unwilling to die for Carver's madness. Carver roared, firing into the sky in blind fury. "Cowards! You'll crawl back to me on your bellies before this is done." But his words rang hollow now. He was bleeding, outnumbered, his men scattering. Still, his eyes locked on Aoka with a predator's hunger. "The girl comes with me, one way or another." Samuel stepped out from cover, rifle steady despite the ache in his arms. "Not today." For the first time, Carver faltered. The confidence that had carried him through every cruelty wavered as the barrel of Samuel's rifle bore down on him. He spat into the dust, backing toward his horse. "This ain't finished," he hissed. "You think paper and pride make you strong? I'll show you strength. I'll tear the world down till there's nowhere left to run." He mounted, blood dripping from his sleeve, and spurred his horse hard, vanishing into the haze of dust. The arroyo fell silent except for the labored breathing of those who remained. Eli lowered his pistols with a shaky laugh. "Well, wasn't that a fine dance?" Samuel ignored him, rushing to Aoka. "You hurt?" She shook her head, though her chest rose fast. "Not hurt. But this ends only when Carver ends." Samuel nodded grimly. He knew she was right. The fight was not victory. It was only survival. And survival meant the war was far from done. As the last echoes of hooves faded, Samuel looked to the horizon. The sun blazed mercilessly, casting long shadows that promised more blood before nightfall. And deep inside, he knew Carver would not retreat to lick his wounds. He would return stronger, meaner, and with allies who cared nothing for truth or justice. The pouch in Aoka's hands weighed heavier than iron, and Samuel realized they weren't just carrying evidence anymore. They were carrying the spark of a fire that could burn the whole territory to ash. The sun dipped low as they rode west, the sky bleeding red and gold across the horizon. Every hoofbeat echoed like a drum of war. Samuel's rifle lay across his lap, but his grip was tighter on the reins than the steel. Aoka rode steady behind him, her hands clutching the pouch that had already cost them too much. Eli followed, hat pulled low, his eyes scanning the trail with restless suspicion. They hadn't spoken since the fight in the arroyo. The silence weighed heavy, each of them wrapped in their own thoughts. Samuel's mind replayed Carver's words. You'll crawl back to me on your bellies before this is done. He knew Carver wasn't bluffing. The man would return with fresh riders, maybe with soldiers bought by gold and whiskey. And when he did, there would be no half measures. By dusk, Samuel pulled the horse into a dry hollow surrounded by stone. The place offered shelter from the wind, but little else. He swung down, scanning the ridges. "We'll rest here tonight," he said. Eli snorted. "Rest? With Carver breathing down our necks, you're losing your edge, Hart." Samuel turned, eyes like flint. "You want to keep riding in circles till the horse drops dead? Be my guest. Otherwise, you'll shut up and help gather wood." For once, Eli said nothing. He tossed his reins aside and stomped off, muttering under his breath. Aoka slipped from the saddle, her face calm but drawn. She crouched near the fire Samuel lit, watching the flames catch. After a while she spoke quietly. "He will come again with more men with law at his side." Samuel didn't look at her. "I know. You cannot fight him alone." "I ain't alone." His voice came sharper than he meant, but her gaze softened as if she understood more than he could admit. Later, when the fire burned low, Samuel took first watch. Eli sprawled against a rock, hat tipped over his eyes. Aoka sat near Samuel, the pouch still in her lap. She untied the sinew cord, opening it for the first time since she revealed its secret. Inside were folded papers, edges yellowed, ink faded but still clear. She spread them carefully in the firelight. Samuel leaned closer. "What's it say?" Her finger traced the words, her voice low but steady. Names of men who sold Apache land for coin, marks of soldiers who looked away, and Carver's name, written twice. Samuel's stomach turned. Proof enough to hang a dozen men in Silver Rock, if only the law weren't already bought by their gold. "You think the courts will touch this?" he asked. Her eyes met his. "Maybe not. But the people will. Once truth is spoken, lies cannot silence it." Her conviction stirred something in him. He'd spent years believing nothing could change, that the world was too cruel to fight. But in her voice, he heard something different. Hope, sharp as steel. Behind them, Eli stirred, groaning as he sat up. He caught sight of the papers and whistled low. "So that's the treasure, huh? Worth more than silver, less than blood." Samuel stiffened. "Keep your distance, Eli." Eli raised his hands. "Relax, Hart. I ain't after scraps of paper, but Carver is. And if you think you can march into town with that and not end up hanging beside her, you're a bigger fool than I thought." Aoka's voice cut through him. "No fool who stands is worth more than a coward who kneels." Eli's grin faltered. For the first time, he didn't have a clever answer. The night dragged, the fire crackling low. Samuel fought to keep his eyes open, scanning the ridges for movement. But it was Aoka who stilled him with a whisper. "They are here." Samuel's blood chilled. "Where?" She pointed to the dark ridge above, where faint glimmers of torchlight flickered like fireflies. Shapes moved against the stars. Riders, closing in. Eli cursed under his breath, scrambling for his pistols. "We can't fight that many." Samuel's mind raced. They were trapped again, boxed in by Carver's relentless pursuit. He checked the rifle, chambering around with a sharp click. "Then we make them bleed for every step." Aoka stood, clutching the pouch to her chest. Her voice was calm, fierce. "If I walk to him, he will spare you. That is the way of men like him. Kill only when their prize resists." Samuel turned on her, fury flashing in his eyes. "Don't you dare. You think I dragged you this far, just to hand you back?" Her gaze didn't waver. "Sometimes survival means sacrifice." Eli stepped forward suddenly, his voice harsh. "She's right. Hart, hand her over, and maybe we live another day. You know Carver wants her, not us." Samuel leveled the rifle at him, voice like iron. "You shut your mouth, Eli. One more word and you won't live another minute." Eli froze, his eyes flicking between Samuel and Aoka. The tension stretched, heavy as the dark sky. Above them, the torches grew brighter, closer. Carver's voice carried down, low and cold. "Hart, you've run long enough. Give me the girl and I'll end this clean." Samuel raised the rifle, heart pounding. He knew the next moment would decide everything. And in the firelight, he saw Aoka's face. Unflinching, resolute, a silent vow burning in her eyes. Whatever happened next, there would be no turning back. Carver's torches lit the ridge like a crown of fire, the silhouettes of his riders black against the night sky. His voice rolled down into the hollow, calm and merciless. "Samuel Hart, you think you can hide behind rocks and shadows? You think one broken cowboy and one runaway girl can stand against me? Give her over. Give me the pouch, or I'll drag you out piece by piece." The words slithered through the dark, heavy with certainty. Carver wasn't just threatening, he was promising. Samuel's jaw tightened. He rose from behind the barricade, rifle steady, his voice cut back sharp and unshaken. "You want her, come take her." The hollow fell silent, save for the wind sighing through the brush. Then Carver laughed, low, cold. He swung his hand forward, and his men descended. Gunfire erupted. Bullets tore into the rocks, sparks and dust filling the air. Samuel fired back, dropping the first rider clean from his saddle. Eli let loose with his pistols, his curses drowned in the thunder of hooves. Aoka crouched low, clutching the pouch tight against her chest. She didn't flinch as bullets whined overhead, her eyes locked on Samuel as if her will alone could keep him standing. Carver rode at the center, dark coat billowing, revolver blazing. He cut through the chaos like a viper, his shots cruelly precise. One bullet tore past Samuel's arm, slicing flesh. Pain burned hot, but Samuel held firm, firing again. Eli ducked behind a boulder, screaming, "We can't hold 'em, Hart!" He fired blind, one pistol clicking empty. "We're finished." Samuel didn't answer. He reloaded, his focus narrowed to Carver's shadow moving closer through the smoke. Then a sudden cry, "Aoka's!" Samuel spun, heart freezing. Carver had dismounted, moving through the fight like a predator in the brush. He lunged, seizing Aoka by the arm, yanking her from cover. She struggled, striking at him, but Carver's grip was iron. He dragged her forward, his revolver pressed hard against her temple. "Enough!" Carver roared. The gunfire faltered, the canyon holding its breath. His men pulled back, circling, their torches painting the night in savage gold. Samuel stood frozen, rifle aimed at Carver's chest. "Let her go," Carver sneered, eyes glittering with madness. "You've no say in this, Hart. She belongs to me, always has. You think you're savior, but you're just another fool who don't understand the game." He lifted the pouch from her hand, shaking it high. "This is power, this is land, gold, law, all in one scrap of paper. And you were stupid enough to think you could carry it across my desert." Aoka spat into the dust, her voice fierce. "You burn for lies, but lies do not live forever." Carver backhanded her, the crack echoing in the hollow. Samuel's blood boiled, every instinct screaming to fire, but the gun pressed against Aoka's head held him still. Carver's grin widened. "Go on, Hart. Shoot. Let's see if you've got the stomach." The air hung heavy. Samuel's hands trembled, not with fear, but with the weight of every choice that had brought him here. He thought of Abilene, of the lives he hadn't saved, of the silence he'd let fester. He thought of his ranch, now ashes, and of Aoka's defiance, brighter than any fire. He drew a slow breath, lowering his rifle an inch. Carver laughed, triumphant. "That's it. That's the Hart I know. Too weak to finish what he—" The crack of a pistol cut him off. Carver staggered, his revolver slipping from Aoka's head. Blood spread across his shoulder. Eli stood behind a boulder, pistol smoking, eyes wide with shock at his own act. I ain't dying for you, Carver," he shouted. The moment shattered. Samuel raised his rifle, firing before Carver could recover. The bullet struck true, slamming into Carver's chest. He fell to his knees, eyes wide, grin collapsing into a snarl of disbelief. He gasped, clutching the pouch even as blood spilled hot across his coat. His voice rasped, weaker but still venomous. "You think this ends me? You think truth matters?" Samuel stepped forward, rifle still aimed. "No, Carver, I think she matters, and that's enough." Aoka wrenched the pouch from his hand, holding it close. Carver's eyes flicked to her one last time, rage and fear tangled in his final breath. Then his body crumpled into the dust, lifeless. The canyon was silent but for the crackle of torches. His men froze, leaderless, staring down at the body. Some cursed, others turned their horses, spurring them hard into the night. One by one, they scattered, the firelight fading until only smoke and silence remained. Eli lowered his pistol, shaking. God help us, we actually killed him. Samuel turned, his chest heaving, blood dripping from his arm. He looked at Aoka, still standing tall, the pouch clutched tight. Her eyes met his, unbroken, fierce. The fight was over. But Samuel knew this was not an ending. It was the beginning of something far larger. And as Carver's body lay cooling in the dust, Samuel realized he'd crossed a line he could never return from. The canyon lay quiet after the storm of gunfire, silence broken only by the crackle of dying torches and the restless shuffle of the horse. Carver's body was just another shadow in the dust, his grin gone, his menace ended. But the weight of his presence lingered, heavy as smoke after a blaze. Samuel lowered his rifle slowly, the barrel hot against his palm. His arm throbbed where the bullet had grazed him, but the pain felt distant, swallowed by the rush of survival. Eli sat slumped against a rock, breathing hard, his pistols empty. His usual smirk had drained away, leaving only a man worn thin by fear and regret. Aoka stood at the center of it all, her dress torn, her face streaked with dirt, but her spine unbowed. The pouch clutched in her hand seemed to glow in the firelight, not with gold or jewels, but with the raw weight of truth. Samuel walked to her side, his voice low. "It's over." She turned to him, her eyes steady. For him, yes, but not for what he served. Her words struck deep. Samuel knew she was right. Carver had been a monster, but he was only the fist of larger men, ranchers, soldiers, men with ink-stained hands who profited from silence. Killing him hadn't ended the fight. It had only removed the mask. Eli laughed weakly, coughing. "You two talk like prophets. Truth don't change nothing out here. Men'll keep killing, keep taking. Carver's gone, sure, but there'll be another to take his place." Aoka's gaze cut to him, fierce but calm. "Another will come, but so will another stand. That is the way of fire, it spreads." Samuel studied her face, the steel in her voice, and for the first time in years he felt something stir beyond survival, not just anger or grief, but purpose. He knelt, pulling Carver's revolver from the dust and tossing it aside. "Then we carry this to Silver Rock. If the law won't listen, the people will. Let them see the names." "Let them see the proof." Eli shook his head, eyes wide. "You'll get yourself strung up. The courts belong to those names. Walk in with that, and you'll hang before you speak a word." Samuel's jaw tightened. "Then I hang, but the truth won't." Aoka stepped closer, placing her hand on his uninjured arm. Her touch was light, but her voice was firm. "We will not hang. We will speak, together." Samuel met her eyes, and for once he didn't doubt. By dawn, they had buried Carver in the canyon, unmarked, the desert his only grave. Eli muttered something about wasting good bullets, but Samuel ignored him. Men like Carver didn't deserve songs or stones. Dust was enough. The ride to Silver Rock was long and quiet. The land stretched wide, unforgiving, but Samuel felt the weight of each mile differently now, not as an exile, but as a man carrying something greater than himself. Aoka rode close, her hand never leaving the pouch. When at last the town's outline rose from the desert, Samuel felt his throat tighten. The streets would not welcome them. Carver's shadow lingered here too, in saloons, in back rooms, in the pockets of men who smiled with knives behind their teeth. But Aoka straightened in the saddle, her chin high, her gaze fixed on the town. "They will hear us," she said, "even if they try not to." Samuel believed her. As they passed the first buildings, faces turned, curious, wary. Whispers followed. "That's Hart. That's the girl. Wasn't Carver hunting them?" Samuel dismounted slowly, helping Aoka down. Her feet touched the ground with quiet strength. She walked ahead, clutching the pouch, each step echoing louder than the murmurs. Samuel followed, rifle across his back, Eli trailing like a shadow of doubt. They entered the heart of Silver Rock, where the courthouse loomed, its doors heavy with the weight of corrupted law. The people gathered, drawn by something they didn't yet understand. Aoka stopped at the steps, turning to face them. Her voice rose, clear as the desert wind. These are the names of men who sold land that was not theirs. Who burned homes, who starved families, who lied to you while they filled their pockets with gold. She held the pouch high, her words ringing out. This is their truth, and now it is yours. The crowd stirred, anger rippling like fire through dry grass. Samuel felt the shift, uncertainty turning into rage, silence breaking into voices. The truth had power after all. Eli muttered under his breath, God help us all. But Samuel only watched Aoka, pride burning in his chest. She had faced wolves, lions, men like Carver, and still stood unbroken. For the first time in years, Samuel felt the weight of his past lift, not erased, but carried forward into something new. Whatever came next, trial, war, redemption, he knew they would face it together. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Subscribe to the channel for more powerful tales of courage and survival, where every choice carries weight and every voice can change everything. And if you want to keep walking with us, watch the next story waiting for you. It's one you won't forget.